The Miami Dolphins could get huge news that is very, very positive in the future of the Dolphins organization, all coming in from the National Football League because the salary cap in the NFL is set to explode over the next 5 seasons, which is very beneficial to a Miami team that has a lot of struggles against the cap right now. Let's dive into the news here because Brett Kollman, who analyzes the NFL on YouTube, made this very smart and interesting note on Twitter the other day, saying that the salary cap is going to explode again. And it's all because of this change in how Nielsen measures ratings. Starting this year, they are leaning into using data directly from smart TV manufacturers to measure viewing habits in addition to the traditional at-home panel method. This means NFL ratings in particular from Sunday Ticket on YouTube are going to be more accurately measured, and that number is going to be way bigger than you think because of just how many Gen-Z and Millennials consume football on streaming services. More accurate ratings means that the league's next broadcast rights negotiations in 28-29 is going to be way more expensive, which ultimately means massive jumps in the salary cap. And this is truly big stuff for the Miami Dolphins, and I want you to be subscribed because we cover everything on this football team, on how the NFL affects the Miami Dolphins, what the Dolphins are rumored to do. So make sure you hit that sub button. We are about 2 weeks away from NFL free agency, so make sure you stay locked in and hit that sub button. But this salary cap increase for the Dolphins is absolutely huge because Miami is still, as we currently stand, $6 million over the 2025 cap after the cuts of Raheem Mostert, Kendall Fuller, and Durham Smythe. So they still have to make some moves to get cap compliant with the National Football League. But with them being so much under the gun, a salary cap explosion in the next 4 or 5 seasons could allow Miami and Chris Grier to backload a lot of contracts and not create as much cap space that is needed right now. You look at the NFL salary cap increases over the last 5 seasons, it's been massive. You had that one weird year where it went downhill in 2021, but after that, it's gone up 14%, 8%, 14% again, and then 6.5% this season in a projected value. So you continuously get to see how the cap increases. And with the note that Kollman just made about ratings being more accurately measured, and that's expected to be a higher number than we currently have, then the number is going to only take a higher jump up in the next 3 to 4 seasons, which is huge because, as I just mentioned, the Dolphins are still in the red. They're in the negative right now. They only have so many moves they can make to create cap space right now. And they do need to create a lot of space because they need to address the interior offensive line, the safety room, the cornerback room now, defensive line as well. And they're just not going to be able to address all of those situations with this much amount of cap space. But with the possibility now that Chris Grier could push some money to the future to add players now is very, very helpful. We know Stephen Ross is very aggressive right now in terms of trying to get a winning product on the football field. Mike McDaniel and Chris Grier's seats are hot as we currently speak. If they don't make the postseason and win a playoff game this year, they could be canned. And Grier is going to need to add to this roster. So the fact that he can push money 3-4 years down the line, expecting a big jump up in the salary cap so it's not as impactful as you would think, that is very, very big for Miami. And when you talk about signing players, yeah, but I think this could be more beneficial in terms of restructuring contracts, specifically Tua Tagovailoa, because you can create $19.1 million in cap space if you restructure Tua's contract. Now, that puts a lot of money guaranteed later on, but that's where the added jump in the salary cap in the 28-29 seasons becomes more and more impactful. You can do the same thing with Bradley Chubb and Teron Armstead to create more than double-digit $1 million in cap space. Tyreek Hill and Austin Jackson are also options with those numbers that could be potentially saved. Zach Sealer is someone also to be an eye on for $5.5 million could be created. But I want to hone in on Tua's contract because right now, these are the 4 seasons that he's under contract and his current cap hits. Now, if you restructured those contracts, you would save a lot of money. We mentioned $19 million. So in 2025, his cap hit would only be $20 million. You'd be under the cap and you'd have a pretty good little breadth and room there to add in free agency. But you see how much the salary cap hits go up in 27, 28, and 29. In 2029, that would be a dead cap hit of $11.1 million because it's not guaranteed that he is on the roster come that year. But you could handle that situation and cap number a little bit better with the number of the NFL cap continuing to go up, as Brett Kollman noted. So when it comes to Tua's contract, it's always the most interesting thing because fans want to move off of him. Some fans like Tua. But let me ask you this. You saw the numbers and the added benefits of restructuring Tua's contract to not. Would you restructure his contract? Type Y for yes, type N for no. Let me know what you would do down in the comment section. When you talk about Tua's contract, it's quite the gamble, but my question is, how big is Stephen Ross going to push for a winning product right now, right? Because if he wants the Dolphins to be in the postseason and snap that playoff win drought, then you should restructure Tua's contract. You should. But then with all of that possible money tied to Tua in the future, that gives you a little cause for concern. And my question is as well, is Mike McDaniel and Chris Grier going to be allowed to do that, right? Because if you restructure Tua's contract, you help McDaniel and Grier right now to add to this roster. But if you do restructure, that also locks Tua in a much more higher likelihood to be stuck on this team. It's harder to move off of Tagovailoa if he doesn't work out in the next 1 to 2 seasons. You could move off right now in 2 years. But if you structure, it's going to be much more difficult. And is Mike McDaniel and Chris Grier going to be here to be punished for that? No, they might be gone after this season. So I'm not so sure how much leeway Chris Grier and Mike McDaniel will have in terms of restructuring to his contract before NFL free agency. And coming up, we are going to talk about some NFL free agent targets for the Miami Dolphins that they could use now knowing that they might have more leeway in the future in terms of cap space. But before we do that, we are sponsored by Public Rec, my favorite clothing company. I love wearing their stuff. This is a shirt that I'm wearing right now. We'll tell you more about this shirt here in just a second. But you all know that nobody's got time for stiff, uncomfortable clothes anymore. You know what I mean? It's February. It's cold outside, and you deserve to be comfortable in whatever you're wearing, no matter what you are doing. So this February, stop settling for the same old stuff. Step up your comfort game with Public Rec. It's about time you treat yourself. For a limited time, our listeners can get 20% off your entire order with code CHAT20 at publicrec.com. That's 20% off when you use promo code CHAT20 at publicrec.com. And I truly love their clothing. They have so many different things that you can wear. I'm currently wearing just a standard long sleeve tee. It's super comfortable. I also have a waffle knit hoodie that I can't stop wearing. Their Daymaker pant is terrific. Their work pant is great as well. You can style in any kind of way you want, but they are not lying. The comfortable fabric and the way it fits to my body is just out of this world. I can't stop wearing Public Rec, and I just want you at home to feel the same way. So this February, treat yourself right because comfort is always in season. Upgrade the Public Rec and feel the difference. For a limited time, you can get 20% off at Public Rec by using code CHAT20 at checkout. Just head to publicrec.com, use code CHAT20, and you're all set. Oh, and when they ask you where you found them, please mention our show. It really helps us out. Find your perfect fit and never compromise on comfort again. Public Rec, where comfort rules. All right, let's get back to talking about some Miami Dolphins football here and looking at some free agent targets. We know the positions that we are going to focus in on here. Interior offensive line, safety, defensive line, but we also have a new added position to discuss in cornerback that we'll get to. But re-looking at some of these interior offensive line free agents, in case you just are missing, Trey Smith, the top one from Kansas City, it sounds more and more likely that he is not going to be franchise tagged by Kansas City, so he will be on the open market. Not really a target for Miami, but him being someone that is targeted by some of the other top teams could allow some of these mid-tier guys to be able to sign with the Dolphins, a.k.a. Will Fries, Kevin Zeitler, James Daniels, Mekhi Becton. I've also got my eyes out for Aaron Banks and Will Hernandez, two guys that I think could be good fits in Miami's zone run scheme system. But we know my top guy here is Will Fries, but I am starting to get grown on James Daniels, Hernandez, and Aaron Banks. At the safety department, we know that the Dolphins are going to have to overhaul this entire room. Unlikely that Javon Holland returns to this organization, and you're not going to retain Jordan Poyer. I think Cameron Bynum is going to be too expensive for Miami. I actually think Justin Reed and Trayvon Morag will be in that same mold as well. But a Talawani Hufanga, Jeremy Chin, Julian Blackmon, Andre Sisco, Elijah Molden, those 5 names are guys that I expect Miami to show interest in. Blackmon, probably the best coverage safety out of that group, but guys like Jeremy Chin and Andre Siskel and Hufanga get much better in the run game. I'm intrigued by any of those 5 names. I'd expect Miami to sign one of them as well when we get free agency started in about 2.5 weeks. But the interior defensive line continues to be something that I want to address because we saw how dominant the Philadelphia Eagles were in the Super Bowl with their trenches. Well, Miami should try to replicate that so they don't fall off a cliff when they get into these cold weather games. Now, I will be honest, there aren't a lot of good free agent targets for the interior defensive line. Top guys are those 3 on the top left: Osa, Milton Williams, and Levi Onwuzurike. I don't know if Miami's going to be able to sign any of those guys because they might be too expensive, which is why I think they should target those type of defensive linemen in the draft, which we'll talk about here in just a second. But before we get to the cornerback room and my plan for the Dolphins in free agency, name your top free agent target. We haven't got to the corners yet. We will here just in a second. But who is the guy that you want the Dolphins to sign the most in free agency? Mine, no shocker here, Will Fries, but let me know yours. But after Kendall Fuller got released to save about $2.5–3 million in cap, which very hit or miss feelings on that. I think Kendall Fuller would have been good for Miami this next season at $8 million, but I also understand that he only played 11 games. He's over the age of 30. I get the release, but I now see the cornerback as one of the biggest needs because they don't have a boundary corner outside of Jalen Ramsey. And these 10 names, I think, could fit in Miami very, very well on the opposite side of Jalen Ramsey. The issue is that most of these guys are going to be too expensive. DJ Reed, Charvarius Ward, Carlton Davis, Asante Samuel, Byron Murphy, those 5 names are all likely going to get $12, $13, $14+ million on an annual average basis. And if Miami wasn't comfortable paying Kendall Fuller $8 million, what makes you think they're going to go out and sign one of those guys on a multi-year big contract? So when I'm starting to look at some free agent targets that actually fit Miami's scheme system, but as well as their budget concerns, these are the 5 names that I have kind of paralleled in here. Jeff Okudah is an interesting one. He's had quite a down career after being a top 3 pick in the NFL draft. He has some promise. He can never stay healthy, though. Stephon Gilmore's a veteran. I'm not sold on that, but he is able to still play. And if the Dolphins need to go cheap at corner, which would not be great, I think Gilmore's a good option. Shaq Griffin is an interesting name. So is Christian Fulton, who was terrible for the Tennessee Titans, had a pretty resurgent year this past season for the Los Angeles Chargers. Not enough to get him paid a lot of money, so you can get Fulton on maybe a 2-year, $10 million contract in total. That's an intriguing person to keep your eye on. But all that matters right now, once you release Kendall Fuller, you made it known that corner is one of your top needs now because you have no future at that position either. Cam Smith was drafted a couple seasons ago to be that leading young guy, but he has struggled year in and year out so far. So with corner being such a big need, that 13th pick in the NFL draft could be used on a corner. You've got Will Johnson from Michigan. You've got Barron from Texas. You've now got a pathway for the 13th pick to be used on corner, which is why I think when you look at free agency, Miami has a clear path because the interior offensive line free agents, I think, in my opinion, are much better than the other positions of need for Miami. Corner, defensive line, you can argue safety and offensive line being right there. But to me, Miami should create as much cap space as necessary to be able to sign some cheap free agents back to the system, like maybe a Benito Jones, a Deshaun Hand, a Calais Campbell, but they should use their big money to address the offensive line. Sign Will Fries, Will Hernandez, an Aaron Banks, a James Daniels. Because if you address interior offensive line in free agency, you will have an experienced, veteran, solidified offensive line from left to right. And then you can use your draft, which you have 7 picks in the first 5 rounds, a projected 10, 11 picks in total, to help the defense in those minute ways. You can go a Walter Nolan at defensive line in the first round. You can go a Will Johnson if he slides, because that's possible. You can go with the corner from Texas, Barron, who's rising up boards. You can go in so many different ways to help add young key pieces to this defense, which just makes it so much more intriguing and allows you so much more versatility entering the draft. If you can solidify your offensive line in free agency, it gives you so much freedom to draft a blue chip player at multiple different positions of need. Starks is another example, the safety out of Georgia. Figure out offensive line free agency, turn your attention to the defense in the draft, and we can maybe have a pretty solid offseason here. And we'll have you covered here all offseason long here on Dolphins Today. So make sure you hit that sub button because we have a lot of news that we should have to share in the next couple of weeks. Franchise tag and the free agency window being opened up. So join the channel today.